Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
That, of course, was Donald Trump on the campaign trail a year ago. Since then, he's clarified that by saying he only meant Muslim countries, and he said only Muslim countries that support terrorism after that. This has morphed into reports of internal discussions about considering a Muslim registry to keep track of people entering from, quote, Muslim countries. Of course, there's no explanation as to how and who would pick which countries would be included or how this even might be done. But all that talk has reminded many people of the internment camps set up to detain Japanese Americans during World War II. Our next guest is the son of an internee, and he's studying whether something like that could happen again. Michael Ego is a professor at the University of Connecticut in Stamford. He teaches the course Japanese Americans and World War II.
I read a piece you penned that I saw in The Advocate, and it was fascinating because obviously it happened on the anniversary of World War II when I read the piece, but also it put in the current context about some of the conversations we're having when there is uncertainty in this world, and specifically some of the things the President-elect has said. And it reminds us of when we've made decisions that we've later as a nation regretted. We're seeing some of the same kind of, maybe if not actions, temperature and language that we've heard before. Specifically, the discussions of a Muslim registry, obviously given the conflicts that are going on in the Middle East right now and some of the radicalization elements. When you heard about a Muslim registry, it reminded you of something else though, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And the first thing that came to my mind was how, in terms of the people that were speaking about this, Carl Higbee was most recently, and also Carl Korach from Kansas, and they were actually, referring to the internment camps. And it just seemed to me that there was ignorance about what the internment camps were.
Well, let's give a little history lesson here, because more than 100,000
yes.
Americans, more than, I think, 3/4 of them were American citizens of Japanese heritage. They were put in internment camps, and for anyone who has this vision like it was some kind of campground, no, they had to sell their businesses or liquidate them or just leave them behind. They were forced to go, and their families included, and these were makeshift, basically barracks, right?
That's correct. And again, the executive order that was signed by President Roosevelt in 1942 was the impetus for this occurring. And as I indicated in the article that I wrote, that there was no due process. Essentially, they got the order, and some of them had maybe a few days and maybe a little longer to gather their belongings. The term that was used in that period was take only what you could carry. And for a lot of people, that was very difficult to choose. To go to a place they didn't really know where they were going, because they didn't say to them, you're going to X location. It was a very, very scary moment. In fact, you'll notice in some of the photographs from that time when people were being taken to the internment camps that people were dressed up in suits and and good clothing. Yeah. And part of the reason for that was that some of them thought that they were going to be executed, that this was going to be their last chance to actually be with their families.
It was interesting because we've done a lot on FDR, and I think some of his contributions to the country have been fantastic, especially in times of trouble, but this is staying obviously in his legacy. And to be fair, it was in the Reagan years where there was more than just reparations, if you will, for the families, but an acknowledgement. I want to read in part what that executive order actually said. It said that the broad historical causes that shaped that order to intern the Japanese Americans were race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. And to that last point, Professor, it's easy to foment when there's fear, to find those in society that fit the spec, whether it be because of faith, country of origin, whatever else the case may be. But if we've learned anything in history, it's really dangerous and almost always with attached with regret.
Right, but the thing is that as it relates to the comment about failure of leadership, there was an opportunity to prevent this from happening. There was actually a study that was done before the war started, because there was already fears that that the Japanese would potentially attack the U.S. And the study concluded that there was no danger. And yet, President Roosevelt did proceed with Executive Order 906s.
And it should be noted, there was not one documented incident
Right.
of disloyalty among Japanese Americans of any kind, both before the internment and after. Bring it to today's context and some of the echoes of some of the language that you think's concerning here, because I've talked to a lot of folks when the discussion during the campaign of a Muslim registry. First of all, the impracticality of it. Well, how do you know someone's faith when they're coming into a country here? Are you doing the eyeball test? And then you've seen this fomented since November, where there'll be, and I don't want to make more of it of a national trend that it is, but yet you'll see swastikas put up here. You've seen people taking people's hijabs off their heads. People in school, we see videos about people saying, build the wall, they're coming for you, to fellow students of Latino heritage. Now, people, I think, have gone to an extreme degree where they talk about Hitler and Mussolini, et cetera, but somewhere in the middle there is, we should be careful, because if there is another attack here, the seeds have been planted that it's us and them.
Right. Well, I think what happened in 1942 was there was an association with a heritage. Clearly, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. There's no question about that. Okay, but the association of saying, okay, that means Americans of Japanese ancestry must be included in that grouping, and there was no differentiation. And so I think when you look at what's going on with this so-called Muslim registry is that how can you categorize an entire group of people, this time on religion, when yes, there may be some people in that group that may have done or potentially could harm our country, but the thing is to actually lump everybody together and say, well, they're all guilty before actually there's evidence.
Because of where they're from,
Right.
or who they
Right.
pray to. And again,
Right.
the point, just to drive home, is sometimes this isn't just theoretical. Sometimes if you look to history, as they say, you learn the lessons of the past.
Right.
And if you don't, you're doomed to repeat them. I take a clue as to what happened after that awful day that will live in infamy. One of those chapters that America not necessarily should it be, and I think definitively shouldn't be proud of. But Professor, great piece here, and I think very apropos with some of the things we're talking about now. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.